Splitting Hairs Podcast.
Welcome to the Splitting Hairs Podcast. This is the Friday night football edition of the podcast we're bringing to you live across all our streaming platforms. Want to shout out our sponsor. This episode and all episodes of the Splitting Hairs Podcast are brought to you by the Wild Hair of Brookings. The next best place to be if you can't make it to the Dana for Senior Day on Saturday. It's the last home game of the regular season, and while the Jacks honor the seniors, familiar and new, who built this program, the Wild Hair is hosting the loudest watch party in town. Happy hour every day from 3 to 7, all day happy hour Sundays and Tuesdays, $3 Wild Islands on Thursdays, $10 domestics, and $22 seltzer buckets during every Jackrabbit game. And don't forget, it is Fireball Friday. If you can't be inside the stadium, be inside the energy, surrounded by the Jackrabbit fans, cold drinks, and every play on the screen with the volume turned up. Celebrate the seniors, cheer on the Jacks, do it at the Wild Hair, proud title sponsor of the Splitting Hairs Podcast. Thank you, as always, to that crew. Want to just let you guys know, due to a little bit of a scheduling snafu, I'm going to be riding solo, if you couldn't already glean that. The boys are tied up with work obligations, or so they say. So we're going to let it slide this time, one and only, because this is going to be a difficult haul for me. So as we take into account Scotty's absence, Stack's absence, and Brian's absence, we got to find a way to haze them. So weigh in the comments section and let me know what you think we should do to hold them accountable. Want to do a little FBSing to start off the podcast. Kevin, I'll definitely get to your question because that's an interesting one. We'll get into that once we talk FCS, but a little FBS in here. We're going to pull up the games this week and do a little presenting. So we're going to pull up the top 10. All right. So, of course, Ohio State with an impressive defense, really holding it down. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of, suitors that are going to be able to take them on, although the Big Ten is a very difficult division, it looks like this year, with the emergence of teams like Indiana. Indiana holding down the number 2 spot. The Fighting Signettis coming from the FCS ranks from JMU, bringing them into the Sun Belt, and then moving on for a lot greener pastures in terms of payday with his big extension to Indiana. I think he shocked everybody. If you can do it at Indiana, you pretty much do it anywhere if you get the right makeup of a head coach and you get the right guys to buy into your program and play good in all 3 phases. And I think, as we'll get into when we talk a little FCS ball security is a key feature of what they're able to do at Indiana. They had a little bit of a scare this past week against Penn State. Is this week going to be a little bit of a test for them, maybe a trap game, or did that wake them up? Who knows? We'll see. Texas A&M is kind of surprising. They have all the resources in the world, but haven't been able to put it together. Mike Elko, the head coach out there, who's a coordinator at LSU, obviously head coach at Duke prior to joining A&M again. This was his second stint there in terms of being on staff. His first, obviously, as a head coach, but he's got those boys rolling, and he's got some really talented players that seem to have the right mindset and are bought in as well, and they care about the right things. Kirk Herbstreit had him on his podcast with Joey Galloway, so really fascinating to see what they do there. And they got a showdown at the end of the year with Texas, and Texas is turning some heads. Obviously, they got a big win against Vanderbilt, who was coming in with all the momentum in the world, having only lost to Alabama. Number 4 Alabama, you see right there, the Fighting Kalen DeBoers. They're they stubbed their toe early with a loss to really a poor FSU team, as it's turning out, but you don't know that at the beginning of the year. And that's really a tale of 2 teams, the direction that FSU has gone. And, it's going to be tough for Mike Norvell out there. And then you got Kalen DeBoer, who's on a different path and trying to shake off the echoes of Coach Saban, a legend that he's following in footsteps of. And I think, they've been playing some good ball. They have all the talent, all the resources in the world, similar to A&M. So not shocked that they are where they are, but I think many people after their performance at FSU are kind of surprised that they're playing as well as they are. Believe is this week Georgia and Bama. Georgia has a marquee matchup this week. No, it's Texas, Georgia. That's right. Texas is going to Georgia, so they'll be in Athens. That's going to be a huge one if Texas can get through that, and then they round it out with that'll be their 10th game. I know they might have one other, and then they play A&M to round out the year. So they're still fighting for their playoff lives. A lot of pundits think that 7-3 could still get them in. Ole Miss, the Fighting Lane Kiffins, does he stay? Texas Tech is balling out. They just thumped BYU, the Stormin' Mormons out there. That was a pretty impressive win. Got all the talent in the world. I think they've spent the most financially on their roster. So really, really interesting to see how that turns out in terms of Texas Tech. And if they're able to get through the Big 12, obviously they'll get seeded fairly decent. And then who knows? It's anybody's guess from there. I didn't like the playoff format they had last year. I don't know if you guys enjoyed it. I think Boise State was seeded a bit high. I don't know if you guys are FBS fans or are able to watch that, but what did you think about the whole format last year? How the group of 5/group of 6 this year got that nod and then really didn't perform well against Penn State. Oregon pulled a close one out in Kinnick. Tough place to play, terrible elements. It was raining the entire game. I really thought the Fighting Gronowskis were going to pull that one out. He hit them with the most aggressive 6-7, which nobody knows what that means still to this day. I think it's witchcraft. It's some Santeria stuff. I've been seeing some stuff go out online, but everybody does it. It catches on, right? 6-7. So everybody's got to do it to look cool. I think Mark did the most aggressive 6-7 celebration I've ever seen. It made me giggle a little bit. I also saw him lose his footing a little bit. He regained it. Just a lot of energy on that play. 4th and goal for the game is what it appeared to be. But for those of you who watched the whole game, on the 3rd down play before, he made a smart decision, tossing the ball out of the back of the end zone, but some precious time probably could have ticked off the clock had they maybe just tried to run it and get some more and then, live to fight another day on that 4th down, but have that clock continue to tick and eat into Oregon's opportunity, which they were able to get home and make hay on. And, there was good defensive coverage on some of the plays that Oregon's quarterback was able to sustain the drives. And sometimes you just got to tip the hat to the other team. Also, Notre Dame losing to Miami and Notre Dame losing another game early on in the year to A&M. It's kind of crazy that they're finding themselves at number 9, but I think they do play a fairly tough non-conference schedule, which is really weird. I don't know. Are they in the ACC fully? They kind of play a combo ACC schedule. I know they are in hoops. Just really weird, but another nod to a very wealthy and affluent program that is able to operate as an independent to some degree there. Maybe they are ACC because I think one of the stipulations to get in was they had to have a conference championship, but I don't think they are actually. I know they are in hoops, but yeah, just another interesting FBS independent that we could talk about with some FCS schools that would love to play FBS independent ball under that classification. So very, very interesting. We talked about Texas. Let's pull it up to for those of you listening, I'm pulling up infographics of the top 25 to do a little FBS in here. Oklahoma, obviously, they go the direction of John Mateer. Mateer had a little hand surgery. They've dropped a couple games. They're still trying to flirt with, Big 12 title hopes or SEC title hopes rather. But SEC is loaded at the top. So we'll see how that pans out for them. Certainly hoping to get a playoff bid nonetheless, as one of the top 12 teams in the nation. And then BYU stubbing their toe last week in Lubbock. Early game, just didn't go their way. They were not able to get anything going offensively. Texas Tech defense is insane. That Jacob Rodriguez kid is unreal. Really fun player to watch. Covers a ton of ground, ton of territory. Really, really impressive. I think, Seth, I think the selection got the format right this year. Hopefully the procedure was right last year, but not the format. Couldn't agree more. So it should be fun to see how it shakes out this year. We got Utah turning some heads. Just seems like Kyle Whittingham and those guys over there just continue to be productive year in and year out. I know they had about a 12th year quarterback the past couple of years. It just was really injury prone and couldn't stay on the field, but a lot of upside. I remember him gutting it out in the Rose Bowl. And Utah's a force to be reckoned with. They play some ball out there in Utah. And then Vandy. So shout out to Clark Lee. I know I beat that drum quite often, but former linebacker coach at South Dakota State, worked his way up through the FBS with, stops as a GA and stops as linebacker coach at UCLA, then going over to Bowling Green, then working his way up to Syracuse and Wake Forest, D coordinator at Notre Dame, and then, of course, landing at his alma mater to get the head coaching job at Vanderbilt. And what he's done there, I think, is pretty remarkable. To be able to assemble a staff, get buy-in, and to be competitive to this degree in the SEC is kind of absurd. When you look at them coming in at the number 14 spot, to be 8-2 overall, to only loss to Texas on the road and Alabama on the road, pretty impressive stuff. And then, of course, when you have a quarterback that has a ton of experience and is, got 5, 6, 7 years, maybe a ball left. Who knows what you can do when you have that kind of security at the quarterback position. Then you have, on the flip side, you look at Miami and you got Carson Beck, who by all accounts was cream of the crop quarterback. You saw what he did at Georgia, and now he's kind of stubbing his toe. And, against Louisville, turned the ball over a ton, made a bunch of questionable decisions with the ball through the air, probably just trying to make a play. And you see what can happen when ball security doesn't go your way. Georgia Tech, I don't think anybody would have had them at the beginning of the year in the top 20. Just playing some remarkable ball. I think they got trounced by Miami last week, and just pretty crazy. Their production this year under Haynes King, former Texas A&M quarterback, and he's made the rounds and landed well in Atlanta, and has been able to really get the Ramblin' Wreck to run through a lot of the ACC and just do some really big things there. We'll see how they shake out. They look to be the kind of the cream of the crop in the ACC this year, which is very, very down, as we'll talk about when we get into some of the top 25 matchups and just matchups around the league. USC. So Mark travels to the Coliseum Saturday at 2:30 to take on the Trojans, the Fighting Lincoln Rileys. Now, they played other ex-Jacks this past week in Northwestern, and just want to shout out Evan Biernston. He played like a man. First touchdown or second touchdown on the ground that Northwestern had, literally bulldozed his running back into the end zone, and he was getting up the second level all night. It just goes to show you what a quality offensive interior lineman can do for both the run game and to just keep the pocket clean for Preston Stone, their quarterback at Northwestern. In terms of identity and what Northwestern wanted to do, they wanted to run the ball. And then when they kind of got behind against USC, it didn't lend itself to their advantage, and USC kind of took control from there. So also really wild play. Shout out to Coach Smith. Had his guys identifying and reading the eyes of the quarterback perfectly. Quarterback for USC threw a pick to one of the D linemen, and then Mavia, I think is his name, the quarterback, never quit on the play, forces a touchback fumble out of the end zone, and that really swung the game. Northwestern was kind of asserting that historical Big Ten, grind it out on the ground, play solid defense, win the turnover battle game. And it backfired in a big way on that, as USC then got the ball, took it down, and scored to establish a bigger lead. So, again, just trying to do too much sometimes can really backfire, and making the right football play sometimes pays bigger dividends. Michigan, really boring. Going to skip through them. I think Ohio State runs through them at the end of the year, gets off the schneid against them, and does what they need to do. Matt Patricia just has that defense churning, and Michigan, I think, rolling out a very good but young quarterback doesn't lend itself to a successful game plan in that one. Virginia turning big heads. Another former ex-Jacks in Washington State went out to Virginia, really controlled and dictated most of that game, but due to some mental errors and some inability to establish consistent offensive drives, which we know a lot too from our perspective as Jacks fans this year, really bit them when it mattered. Louisville turning heads. Jeff Brom, great offensive mind, great coach. He has Miller Moss, who transferred from USC. I think Miller Moss is a pretty consistent quarterback for him and his system. They want to run the ball, play good defense, and sprinkle in some effective quality play action pass and some other things like that. Louisville's churning and burning. And then you got Iowa, probably the best 6-3 team in the nation. Mark's healthy. Really think they get that game at Indiana. Got to make some field goals too. Inopportune misses there. And then obviously Mark going down just completely disrupted the offensive rhythm and had a quarterback come in who really couldn't get it done. Would love to see them emerge a little bit more in the passing game, but I think anybody who's Iowa fans on this fully knows that's not going to happen in a Kirk Ferentz system. They want to play great defense, establish control of the game, work the clock, sprinkle in the passing, even under Tim Lester. And that return game is going to be special with Weegan. So Pittsburgh, really surprising here. Just the work that they've been able to put together. Again, in a down ACC, we'll see what they're able to do. Tennessee, another South Dakota boy leading the helm there, and Josh Heupel. So be fascinating to see how that shakes out in their final season game, season finale against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt hasn't had a lot of success against Tennessee historically. Who's going to win the Battle of Tennessee on that one? And then South Florida, the group of 5, group of 6 schools. We saw North Texas take it to Washington State. Brian, myself, and Zach, we all went out to that game. It was crazy. I've never seen a team shoot themselves in the foot more. But that being said, North Texas was a pretty impressive team in terms of the roster they've been able to put together. That Mestamaker quarterback is pretty impressive, and South Florida put it on them. So South Florida also beat Florida, and South Florida beat the brakes off Boise State to open the year. So they're a team to keep an eye on in terms of group of 6. With the talent coming out of Florida that they're able to assemble on that roster, I think they may be able to get someone, catch them not looking and underprepared. And then Cincy out of the Big 12, making some waves, creeping into the top 25. Transitioning into some of the games that are going to be fascinating to catch this week. We have Clemson at Louisville. I think Clemson being extremely down, that's tonight. Clemson at Louisville's on tonight on ESPN. Really hope YouTube TV either caves or ESPN caves, because they're doing the people a disservice to not have these streaming platforms, since that's the way everything's transitioned. Hopefully they get something sorted out, because people got to toggle back and forth. They're paying too much for prescription or for subscriptions. It's really not great customer service. I think it's a little bit of greed seeping in on both ends, but either way, if you're a fan of ball and you want to check these out, I'm interested in the Oregon-Minnesota game. Clemson, obviously, does Dabo stay? Has college football outgrown him in terms of way he wants to assemble a program and build a team? They've dabbled in the portal a little bit more recently, but I just think that maybe, sometimes people outstay their welcome, and maybe that's the case in Clemson. I sure love the way he goes about things. I think he's a person of high character, but it'll be interesting to see, because Coach Brom's got the Cardinals playing really well. Minnesota at Oregon again tonight on Fox. I'm excited to see, how legit Minnesota is. If you take the Nebraska game, 9 sacks, pretty stout D. Can they establish rhythm and momentum with a young quarterback? Again, that seems to be a running theme against Oregon, which is coming off of a very tightly played game. They're at home. I don't expect Oregon to play down to the competition. I think they're gonna probably walk away with this one, but you never know. Coach Fleck could have the boys playing tough, and they could look like the team that played Nebraska. South Florida and Navy. Navy is a better team. Preparing for that triple option, that's going to be tough. South Florida, again, we mentioned all the talent they've got. Arizona, Cincinnati, not terribly familiar with either of those teams, but Cincinnati probably should get it done, especially at home. Michigan, Northwestern, they're at home. Northwestern's at home. Is Wilde able to get off? Are they able to establish their style of play that they want to inflict on the opponent? Play a good run scheme, and then play great defense. That's what they're going to need to do to get it done against Michigan. Maybe we can knock them out of the top 25. Texas A&M at South Carolina. South Carolina's down. They got a really good quarterback, South Carolina does, but I just don't think that'll be enough for them. They're going to have to see Texas A&M completely collapse to get that going. Wisconsin at Indiana. Me, like many people in the FCS who are familiar with Coach Eck and seeing what he's done at New Mexico, just think it's a matter of time before he or the head coach at San Diego State get the nod to come help resurrect the Badger program. They did get a win last week, but man, for what they're paying Coach Fickell, it sure does seem like a subpar performance with what he's been able to do. And it's really shocking to shout out my boy Brian. He's always like, Fickell had Cincinnati eaten. Obviously, they were in prime position. They were in a huge bowl game. I believe they were in the playoff before. And to see all those guys that he's able to get drafted or help get drafted, it's just kind of crazy. Crazy to see what's happening at Wisconsin with more resources, you would imagine. Notre Dame at Pitt. They're at Pitt. For Coach Narduzzi and the Pitt Panthers, this is going to be an opportunity to show that they're for real this year, establish themselves as a real contender, maybe not in the ACC, but overall. So that'll be fascinating. And then when we look at some other FBS games, Oklahoma at Alabama, that'll be a crucial one. Coach DeBoer able to continue the momentum that he's had throughout the year, especially at home, playing against a good Brent Venables Oklahoma defense. Is John Mateer going to be able to muster enough offensive production to keep that game tight? We talked about Iowa SC. Mark goes to the Coliseum. That should be fascinating. I'm going to try to catch some of that on Big Ten Network while I'm watching the Jacks. Virginia at Duke. Duke's a pretty good team. They have the former head coach at Miami as their head coach, and he's been able to establish a pretty good resume this year. You know, it is Duke. He is taking over for Elko. He has had to institute his own philosophy and schemes and what he wants to do. Virginia, though, they're playing with a lot of momentum. Should be fascinating to see if Virginia can keep it up. And then Georgia Tech at Boston College, they'll probably throttle them. Coach Bill O'Brien is struggling to take that momentum that he had from a little bit from last year into this year. And then Texas Tech has UCF coming to visit it in Lubbock. I think that Scott Frost struggles, probably gets blown out in that one. And then NC State at Miami. This is kind of my sleeper. I think NC State can put it on Miami, maybe knock them off, but we'll have to see. Now transitioning into the more fun stuff for the FCS contingent here. This is the top 25. A lot of movement from last week. You know, the Jacks have lost 3 straight currently, and so they drop out of the top 10. They are coming in at 16 towards the bottom of the list here. Top North Dakota, top of the mountain here. North Dakota State, Montana coming in at number 2. Montana had a really, really poor showing last week against Eastern Washington. In reality, that game looks a lot different if a quarterback just knows how to spike the ball. So they escaped that one, but sometimes teams that get to the show, they're more lucky than good on some days. Montana State, this is good for the Jacks, in my opinion. Their continued ascension and their continued consistency in terms of productivity and how they're beating teams lends itself well to the Jacks resume, because obviously we were able to go out to Bozeman and get a win, a very gritty win, albeit with our starting quarterback and a lot more health than we have currently. Tennessee Tech and Lehigh coming in at 4, Tennessee Tech coming in. They're doing really well. I see a lot of stuff about their head coach. He has a lot of structure. I like the way he runs his program. I think Tennessee Tech is probably a sleeper to make some waves in the playoffs. I don't know how far they'll go, but they'll turn some heads, I believe. Tarleton State, I don't know if they're pretenders. I think they're a good squad. I think they're going to do some good things in the playoffs too, similar to last year. But are they a quarterfinals or a semifinals team? I think time will tell. Harvard, the Ivies coming in at 7. It'll be really interesting to see an Ivy League team enter the playoffs. I believe it's this year that they're able to be playoff eligible. So now seeing them in the rankings isn't so frustrating when they're actually participating in postseason play. I know Kevin probably beats the drum on Mercer. I think they're probably a early-ish out in the playoffs. Maybe, if they get a bye, second round, exit is possible. I don't know how deep they go. UC Davis, it'll be interesting to see how they produce throughout the rest of the year. They got a couple games on the schedule looming that'll be pivotal for them. Villanova, Rhode Island. Villanova, I've seen some projections that Jacks could head there again. I know Villanova is not eager to see that happen probably in terms of their fan base. Just seems to see like we are paired up with them quite often. But, wherever the road goes, I'm sure the roster will try to take on whoever's in front of them. Rhode Island, Rhodey's been playing pretty consistent the past couple years. They're showing that they can get it done, and we'll see what happens there. Monmouth, same thing. I think a few years back they were pretty good, but to come in at 8-2 at number 12 there is pretty impressive. And then North Dakota at 6-4 at 13th in the ranking is kind of impressive. I think that close loss at Kansas State's really doing it for them. They're a good football team. They really played North Dakota State very tight as expected. With a healthy quarterback in their signal caller in there, a lot of things can happen. But that game was very, very close. It came down to the end. It makes sense. North Dakota is where they are. Illinois State coming in right after them. Illinois State's quietly getting it done. We'll see what they're about this week. And I know they're chomping at the bit to secure a higher playoff seeding or playoff draw. So that'll be fascinating when we talk about them and break that down. Stephen F. Austin, 8-2, coming out of the Southland. We'll see what they're about. And then just after them is South Dakota State. So we know about all their snake-bitten era currently here with the injury bug that's caught up to us. Obviously Coach Jackson has done a great job of trying to assemble a roster overnight, hold it together with duct tape. But I think just the reality is it's everything's coming to a head. To be able to build a team so quickly and to establish a quick 7-0 run under great decision-making with Chase Mason. I've beaten the drum about his athleticism and how sometimes his mechanics start to lag behind because he has so much faith in his arm talent. And we do have such good skill around him. Jack Smith being a great emergence of that, who really didn't get a ton of run early on in the year. And you're starting to see him clamor for more and more reps. But obviously Coach Jackson has done a great job to getting us to 7-0. And then now you're seeing it takes a lot more than that. And perhaps he put makeup on a lot of things early that disguised maybe a little bit more of reality. So that's very interesting. What shocks me here is South Dakota coming in behind us. Of course, they have one more loss, albeit to an FBS school. They did get it done last week in Vermilion, and we'll talk a little bit about that game. And then Abilene Christian coming in below that. So be fascinating to see. So I'm going to take some of the questions now that we've got in the chat, drop them in here, and then we'll talk a little bit of Jack's ball this past week and then what we can expect moving forward. Did I ever think that we would lose 3 in a row ever again? I never foreseen. I didn't think that we would lose 3 in a row ever. Not unless something unforeseen happened, like tons of injuries, like our starting quarterback missing significant time. And I think that again just goes to show that we were holding this roster together with a lot of glue, duct tape, and other things, because reloading at next man up positions like your backup quarterback, I mean, we were absolutely decimated in terms of recruits coming in that possibly could have played right away that went to Washington State, or obviously top tier talent like Bjernston leaving, and we're able to reload at skill position and get guys from the portal that really helped. but they can't throw the ball to themselves. They can't protect. And then on defense, when you're unable to manufacture a consistent pass rush because your top defensive lineman goes down early against Montana State, Reese Kirschenman's been out the entire year. I think that game at Indiana State, we really needed that one. I thought that was a foregone conclusion, but nothing in the Valley is. And the way they played North Dakota State the previous week, that lent itself to a lot of confidence when they were rolling in from Terre Haute. So didn't get it done. It just goes to show why you need to be ready in all three phases against top tier conference competition in terms of the Valley versus some of these other conferences like the Pioneer League or the Patriot League, some of these other conferences that aren't as deep top to bottom. I'll tell you this, though. I'll make this claim. I don't think Coach Jackson ever loses 3 in a row again under his tenure. I don't foresee that happening again. And yes, I did say Hayes. We're going to have to Hayes Brian and them pretty significantly for making me do this solo. Does this year affect the way FBS schools look at SDSU as an invite? Or would it take another year outside of the top 10 to really make them say no? That's a great question. I don't think that performance plays as much a role in terms of FBS suiting as a lot of fans might think. If that were the case, North Dakota State probably would have gotten an invite a long time ago. I think a lot of it has to do with media market size. I think North Dakota State has, I've talked about it tons, probably has 10x our city populace, our town populace in Brookings. So it's like 15 to 20,000 in the metro area that they've got up there in Fargo-Moorhead. I think it's like 200 plus. So you're able to pull more eyeballs, you're able to pull more resources. And on top of that, they've had a rich tradition of being successful at the D2 ranks. And then when you look at, media markets, would it have to be a joint deal where South Dakota State, North Dakota State, and some of the Montana schools decide that, they're ready, they're equipped and ready from a financial perspective. If it's football only, that's not as lucrative as some of these other opportunities to bring in good basketball programs. The Jacks have that, but again, media market size can impact that. That's a really good question, though. Missouri State getting an invite. Success is way down on the list of qualifications. And shout out to Missouri State for actually, proving it when they get there. I think they have 5-6 wins already this year. I know they're not bowl eligible. This is a transition year, but it's pretty impressive nonetheless. You look at Sam Houston last year. I want to say they had like 10 wins before Casey Keeler left to go to Temple. And, a lot of things can happen. I think that's what infuriates a lot of the North Dakota State fans when they see the success of the JMUs of the world. And same thing with South Dakota State. You're weighing and measuring, okay, we've done this at the FCS level. The other school has done it for, a significant amount of time and is now in double-digit national titles. And so it does get kind of stale. Certain things do kind of become an expectation. And if you're looking at it from a product standpoint, as a fan, you get fatigued. It's just natural. So you want a new challenge. And that's the same thing, same type of mindset that any competitor would have. Well, they're looking at, a lot of fans disparage these bowls, and they might not be that interesting, but the opportunity to string together 1-2 years that get you that at-large bid into the CFP, that could be, program changing in at the highest level. Even if it's like one win and you're done, you can build on that momentum and you can build on that. It has a lot of marketability. This would be sweet. I like Ron's idea here. Time to form an FBS conference. I'm a big advocate for the Snow Belt Conference. I think that would be great. Although some of the teams I've seen in the mock-ups probably need to get dropped. I don't think Cal Poly, although from a media market, Cal Poly maybe, but they're not a snow team. I've seen that one kind of sprinkled in. And you look at, Idaho, do they want to go back up? I've seen them in there too, although geographically they might fit a little bit better. North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Montana State, and then, I don't know, Wyoming. Wyoming makes sense to me. Colorado State, I know they're going into the refurbed Pac-12. It could be fascinating. Yeah, the Jacks too, Ron. NDSU has been ranked as high as 30 in the Sagarin over the ACC to SEC wannabe schools. guys, I see what you're saying here. NDSU to the SEC, that's a pipe dream, but you never know. You never know. I know Kevin's yawning because we're talking FBS here and he thinks FCS is superior. I will say FCS definitely was superior in terms of purity of ball, but now it's become poaching grounds, right? It's become poaching grounds and a developmental system to get these guys to get bigger money. And look, I can't hate on them, but constraints and guardrails definitely need to be put on the FCS or on college football as a whole, so that there's not this unmitigated free agency where it's pay to play and you're able to just use the FCS as poaching grounds. And not only the FCS, D2 is feeling it also. I mean, Kobe Claiborne is an example of a guy jumping up and playing most of his ball, or at least half of it, at South Dakota State. So, it's a trickle-down effect that's being felt at each level. Yeah, and the Bobcats as well are moving up. So I think, like, when you look at the Sagarins and you look at the strength of schedule, I think it was kind of comedy. Someone said that Missouri State is having success at the FBS level because they're in an inferior conference. And I, hate to really, rain on someone's parade, but that's kind of true. It would be fascinating. See, that's the thing. When you have these runs like North Dakota State's had, South Dakota State's had, even Montana State, and the other Montana school, the Grizz, when you see them have this string of success, you want to see what that success would stack up against in terms of some of these group of 6 teams, which I do think an impending split is coming. I think JMU has probably the best outside shot to get into the playoff if South Florida stubs their toe. And I don't know how you don't take JMU above them, because USF beat Florida. I mean, yeah, it's a Power 4, A4 school, whatever you want to call it, but 1 loss versus 2 losses, I think that's a very different complexion. It'll be interesting to see. A couple more questions here. Get them in the chat. I'll field them, and then we'll dive into our thoughts from last week with a little bit of coverage on Illinois State for the upcoming matchup. Kevin, I know you have questions. You're just itching to get them out. Nothing. You got no questions about the Jacks? Any questions about the Jacks or the FCS as a whole? I don't know that the law. Nobody likes to lose to a rival, but I don't know how much they actually impact recruitment, particularly when you look at what can you do for me type situations that you're seeing from a lot of kids these days. And also, I mean, I'm sure every town, every school says, we have a culture, we have an environment, but it all matters how that fits with that recruit. And I think South Dakota State does a great job of recruiting products to develop them. But no doubt Dan's going to be looking to the portal, and those portal guys don't have as much of an affinity to local spots. So could it hurt? Yeah, maybe. But historically, we were able to trounce South Dakota for decades, a decade for sure, at least at the FCS level. So we'll see how that plays into things in terms of recruiting at the end of this season. It's a good question, though. Is the QB playing? I'm going to say no. And I don't have any inside information. I'm just going to say no when you look at the fact that a high ankle sprain, if it was that, is about a 4 to 6 week recovery just to get back to some semblance of normal. And even then, do you have the same mobility in the pocket? Do you have any escapability where you can extend plays outside the pocket? If it's a midfoot sprain, I'm saying definitely not. Midfoot sprains are more serious on a number of levels. I had a Liz Frank injury, and I was in a boot for 10 weeks. Now, as a 300-pound defensive lineman, when that happened to me, Chase is certainly not that, but Chase is more explosive. So what does that mean? That means when you get into plantar flexion, when you plant and you go to cut and push off and be explosive, can you generate that magic or generate just your natural ability at 80%, at 90%? I don't know. And then with our offensive line question marks and how they've been playing lately, I don't know that it's in his best interest to get rolled out in that manner. Is it in the team's best interest to win right now, to roll him out at 70%? Probably. But I'm not going to say Chase Mason lines up. SDSU is favored. I think they're favored. One, being at home. Two, I don't think they've ever lost 4 in a row I don't think my team's ever lost 4 in a row. I know we didn't lose 4 in a row. And I don't think that that Vegas foresees us losing 4 in a row. Also, I think that there's a big question mark that maybe Vegas or some of these people have a inclination that Chase might be lining up. So who knows? Jack Henry did play a lot better than our quarterback room has played to this point, and I think he'll only continue to get better. But again, we got to make better decisions with the ball when we're in scoring range, which we'll get into. Will Chase get an injury year, I think is the question here. He played 7 games, so I don't think so. You never know with the NCAA anymore. Guys might get time added for who knows what. You sue the right people like Pavia did. You bring the right ruckus to the table, and you never know what could happen. But I think that he's got another year anyway. I think also he's looking at his future, as he should. I mean, the guy has NFL talent more in his pinky than I've seen in a lot of people in terms of sheer arm talent. And so I think another year of development, whether it be with South Dakota State, which by all accounts, he's a huge South Dakota State guy. I mean, he probably turned down a lot of baseball money. He's probably already turned down FBS. I know he has turned down FBS money. And I know there's suitors constantly chirping in his ear. So I think my guess would be that he would come back to South Dakota State because he'd have unfinished business in terms of playing from start to finish throughout the year. He will stay. I hope so, Ron. I hope you're right on that one. I believe so too. I think he's a high character guy who loves his state. And that's kind of a dying breed nowadays. So I'd love to see it. Couple more questions. Final few. Yeah, I do think that we're favored purely on reputation in this one, according to Vegas. But it's our job to make that reputation true, right? So hopefully South Dakota State can get it done in the other phases and not put so much pressure on a young quarterback if, in fact, Jack Henry is the one that rolls out there. So when we look at the matchup, here we go. You really use no product in your hair. Nothing. No product in this bad boy. Nothing. I know, Kevin, it's okay to be jealous, but I have gray hair, so don't be too jealous. Who is not making the playoffs? Who are the bubble teams? This is a good question. That's going to be huge. Like, how many Missouri Valley teams do they take? How many Big Sky teams do they take? Is UC Davis, if they drop 1 or 2 more, are they a bubble team? Is the threshold really 7 wins? Because if it's 7 wins, the Jacks should be in, especially with a victory on the road to Montana State, who's playing as well as they are. And when the committee factors in, we've had our 2nd, 3rd string quarterbacks in there. Hagan gets healthy. He comes back right around playoff time, I would imagine. And then if you have Chase Mason rolling out there, that looks a lot different. That's a playoff team makeup right there. Yeah, the Missouri Valley does get team into the playoffs, but how many would be the question this year? Yeah, us favored by 11, I would say, is absurd, especially given Coach Spack's defenses are pretty good and Mark Gronowski's not out there, and we're not rolling out the 23 and 24 version of the Jackrabbit defenses, especially from a depth perspective. 5 or 6 Missouri Valley teams, that's the question. So North Dakota State's in. This week is going to clean up a lot, right? South Dakota State wins. They're in. They get another ranked win. They're in. If Illinois State gets a win, they're in. So it's 2 right there. Has USD done enough? They're 6-4. They got to get another win. You look at North Dakota, they're a tweener. They still got the Jacks left. They got Southern Illinois this week, I believe. So, or USD has Southern Illinois this week. So Southern Illinois shot themselves in the foot. It's a gauntlet this year. I don't know if it's so much parity as much as it is other teams that were expected to excel are injured. And that's the case. Like South Dakota State, USD was poached heavily from the portal. They've suffered injuries, but a lot of their injured players have stepped up and risen to the occasion. So I think the Valley should get 6, but they'll probably get 5, and the playoffs will be watered down as they currently are. All right. Great questions. Appreciate you guys weighing in. I'm going to talk a little bit of the USD game from last week. Just to hit it from a global perspective, I think I want to say that the job that Coach Jackson has done is pretty damn impressive, considering that we ran on a string of 7 straight wins, rattled them off, traveled to Montana, one of the toughest places to play in the subdivision, 25 raucous fans there, gold rush game, got it done when we needed to get it done, made the plays when we needed to, rose up on defense, and aside from the one special team snafu, really could have shut that game down in regulation. You look at the way that the roster was assembled. We brought a lot of leadership in from the FBS level. When you look at guys in the secondary with Kobe Bretz, you look at Alex Bullock, who's been a top producer through the air. He's the go-to when it's not been young Jack Smith, who he was able to retain through recruiting. A lot of these young cats could have transferred and left. He did bring a lot of guys in with familiarity of the program, which is important from a coaching perspective. I think maybe schematically, I think defensively, we're definitely doing a good enough job schematically. I don't think it's so much scheme as it is execution and a lot of missed assignments and mental errors, particularly in run defense. When I look at the film from the USD game, there are plays there where the defensive line is stunting as a whole, and we got a defensive end who's not shuffling down, taking the air out of the play and spilling it to the edge defender. And you got a guy, LJ Phillips, rattling off a touchdown run that really should not have happened. We did get caught in a poor scheme play, according to Coach Jackson, when they hadn't shown on film that they were going to run the ball in a red zone situation when they're like 3rd and 10 or more to go. And they catch us in a bad look and they run the rock and they score. Again, that's a function of having a smart quarterback who can read and diagnose the defense and what you're throwing at him and get into the right play. And he's played enough football to know tendency and schemes, and he watches film too. And you see the difference in the gap there kind of when you don't have your guy, Chase Mason, rolled out there. He's not the reason that all of these losses have started to have a domino effect, but he is a big difference maker, right? That's the reason that the quarterback position is the most respected and the most pressure-filled, and why they get paid the most in the NFL. So when you look at Aiden Bauman, that's a big gap in terms of talent, experience, and perspective in tight moments like that. I think, too, I don't think we really have rhythm offensively. Yes, that's from the quarterback position, but we need to be able to maintain consistency in our run game when we're gashing them and understand our personnel and not lean on a redshirt freshman quarterback to try to force a play in the red zone and turn the ball over there. That being said, protection has to be more consistent, and we need to do better in the run game so that we can establish a rhythm and not hurt ourselves with penalties, shoot ourselves in the foot, and get behind the sticks for a young quarterback. So these things tend to have a snowball effect. And when you can't establish rhythm or build any sort of momentum on either side of the ball, whether you get a stop and when you do get a stop, then you get offensive penalties. I thought some of them were suspect in terms of PI that extended a drive or two of USD's, but the call is the call. So you got to rise up with that adversity and sudden change and make a play. And, looking at coverage too, a lot of the coverage against North Dakota State, I thought was pretty decent coverage. You just got a guy like Cole Payton making the throws. Similarly, I thought we just gave up way too much on the ground against USD. I mean, 168 yards rushing to LJ Phillips. I don't think we've given up that high of a total to any one running back in close to a decade. I can't imagine we've done that. I mean, overall, we tend to only give up about, I mean, historically under Coach Rogers and Coach Stig, we didn't give up more than like 100 yards to one rusher, period, or sometimes more than 100 yards rushing over the past couple of years. So pretty crazy. Again, there were a couple times here where I think I saw maybe a spy on Bauman, or, we're doing things to where, or from a rush perspective, where he's not a guy who's going to extend plays with his legs. And so I don't know why you wouldn't light him up and then force him to make a throw under duress. We didn't do that at times. And I think that that was frustrating. I've seen a lot of our players are designed to leave a DL free and have him neutralized with eye candy, but many times those free defenders are blowing up plays. Well, sometimes that's a read of the quarterback. So you got to understand, if they are sending the house, who's the free blitzer, and you have to throw off the blitzer. So you need to throw into the blitz because he's vacating an area. Now that's twofold. That's on the receiving core to understand and read hot, right? So for those of you who've ever seen the movie Wedding Crashers, when he's shouting out red 7 hot route, it's kind of a joke, but that's true. When you're getting blitzed, you need to run the hot route. So communication needs to take place, and that happens with reps. But when another thing too, on that great play Jack Henry made where he escaped outside the pocket, that was all effort, great play. The way the routes were designed, it seemed to be going to that direction to where they could bail him out, or it was scramble rules, and Jack Smith got to the right spot to give him a target. However, if you pull that up on teaching tape, you'd say left guard's got to maintain his block, and I want to see you climb the pocket, Jack Henry, to hit your open receiver, because whenever the pocket is maintained, they call it the cup. Whenever the cup is maintained and you don't spill the water or the cereal, whatever your analogy is, you want to make sure that quarterback climbs north-south in the pocket, because the shortest distance to a good read is going to be north-south. But when you have dented pressure that we've seen far too often from defenses, then that's going to be a real issue in terms of the quarterback having a clear lane to throw. And young guys are going to panic in every single one of them, unless they are a particularly special player. They've played against great competition in prep ball, or they've been coached up on it. They do not climb north-south in the pocket. They tend to bail out outside, or they tend to get depth and give the rushers an easier opportunity to get a sack for big yardage. So it's frustrating all around. But again, let's not abandon the run game. Let's try to get the run game more established. Let's make sure we're making our reads. Seems like Loftridge is a slow starter, but gets stronger as he gets more carries. I think they need to have more patience with him and keep giving him the ball. Yeah, I mean, he definitely does seem to be like a hot hand rhythm back, but also, he was doing great on the drive that we decided to, take a shot at the end zone and put the ball in harm's way. So, again, our coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball needs to lean on personnel and understand our personnel, and maybe not have too much trust in them in certain situations. They need to maintain control of the game through their calling and stuff like that. And I know Coach E will do that, and he'll get it done. I think that with Loftridge too, a lot of times he needs to get his reads need to improve and be sharper. But again, is he getting spooked by early penetration and he's just trying to use his athleticism? I mean, what are we talking here? Are we talking zone scheme or power scheme? Because zone scheme, in mid zone, he's bouncing the ball a little bit early. And in power, is he pressing the A gap the right way and staying tight to that path that we want him to take? There's not a ton of complexity at the running back position, but it is nuanced in certain ways where if you're not crisp with your technique, you can get into trouble, and then you're just sheerly relying on ability. And then again, we have young backs where the speed of the game, yes, they should be caught up to it now. Speaking of James Basinger and Josiah Johnson, but it still takes time to get those reps, get those carries. And again, those guys I think are rhythm carries too, are rhythm backs where if they get a hot hand, they're good. I want to see more out of Josiah as well. I think his physical presence can really help spell Loftridge, and then the burst of Basinger can really show up, hopefully, with some good running lanes created. DT's blowing up the jet sweep because he's left unblocked and he doesn't follow where our O-line goes. Yeah, a lot of it, some of these guys are cutting backside. They're allowing themselves, they're not following the flow of the offensive line and they're just trying to make a play. I mean, some of that is just Johnny's and Joe's and not X's and O's. But are you talking, Seth, are you talking off Jackrabbits on offense or are you talking the Jackrabbits on defense? Because sometimes I know we're trying to get across face defensively, like when we're on defense. And again, it's a sheer matter of technique where our DNs need to close down tighter and not get so far upfield to create more running lanes for the running backs. And our linebackers, sometimes they're too deep. Sometimes they're taking a false step backwards because they're reading pass. And they need to attack ferociously and not allow those offensive linemen to lay on them, which if you go back and watch some of the game film, which is another reason I hate ESPNU, it's a slap in the face. It's like a token national spotlight because you can't even go back and rewatch the play. So I only saw highlight cut-ups, positive or negative. But our linebackers need to scream towards the line of scrimmage when they diagnose. Our plays getting blown up by plays like that. Yeah, that a lot of that is just no offensive lineman even getting a hand on, or if they're going elephants on parade and they're all trying to get outside our offensive line, that's them going back door. And, if they're blitzing off the edge, like you're talking about, that's different. Quarterback needs to know how to throw off of that. But if they're blitzing off the edge, again, too, I'd like to get us in a better play. A lot of times when the center's reading numbers in the box, if you have a favorable advantage to one side of the center or the other, the quarterback needs to know to check that play to get us into an advantageous spot like that, or trade the tight end or H-back, whomever it may be, to get better numbers to the direction we like, or dummy call that, have them trade, still run and execute the play, or you can have the tight end sift backside to account for that. But look, this is like, I've got 4 decades of experience with ball. They do not have that yet. So it's that a lot of this stuff is 4D chess or 3D chess if you like Kamala. Stack's probably going to get pissed at me for that one. So let's talk a little bit about South Dakota State versus Illinois State senior day. This is a big one. We've talked about it. It's a win and you're in for either one of these squads. To get to 8 wins, Illinois State's 3-1 in the conference. It's going to be crazy. Spack has been there for a long time, since 2009. So I was a junior. That's how long he's been there. And he clearly, very clearly, any of you who know Coach Spack or have seen pictures of him, he's got a slick mustache. He's a true throwback to the Ditka type era. He's had success, right? So we can't sleep on them. I know they've been down a few years here, but he's 95-65 as a head man in Normal, Illinois, and they usually play pretty good defense. The Redbird offense is pretty, it's doing pretty well currently. Sorry, I'm reading off this. This is I got the wrong breakdown. 1 second. Yep, it's not coming up. Let me pull it up. Pull it up on my phone. Tommy Rittenhouse is their quarterback. Yeah, Tommy Rittenhouse is their quarterback. He's got 25 TDs on the year, only 4 picks. So he is dealing right now. He's playing well, not turning the ball over, protecting it. Dawson is their running back. He's got 118 carries and 3 TDs on the year. Not a ton of production in terms of like historical backs like they've had that have been in the league, but he's does just enough. Subkowitz, their top receiver, has 613 yards receiving on the year, 42 receptions. So he's obviously going to be a possession type receiver, but he also can get open downfield because he's got 8 touchdowns. Bauer, their linebacker, has 3 sacks on the year. Nijkamp has 94 tackles on the year. So productive, very, very productive. Again, they're going to play good defense. There'll be multiple 4-3 scheme as a base, but they'll roll out a nickel out there. They're going to design different pressure packages to come after Jack Henry or whomever lines up there. If it's Chase Mason, I would say nothing's going to change, and they're going to heat him up to test that lower leg, that foot, whatever it may be. It's going to be our job to try to get the ball out on time. I want to see what Coach E does to get Henry in rhythm outside of the quick tunnel screens, bubble screens, and different things like that. I want to see what we can do to be creative while keeping things relatively simple in making sure that he can deliver manageable passes, whether it be to the tight end. Can we establish the run game? Are they going to load up the box? I would think so. I think they're going to load up the box and force us to beat them through the air. And then again, they're going to roll out different packages to try to disguise blitzes and make the game super complex for either Henry or Chase to have to navigate that. Loffridge is our leading back. Obviously, most of his production has come earlier on in the year, but he's got 801 yards. Bullock's been our guy lately, 683 yards. So pretty comparable, although our run game statistics lend themselves to the advantage here. So I want to see if we can do that even with the stacked box. Do we throw to set up the run? Do we run to set up the pass? What's that complexion going to look like? And then is Chase Van Tol good to go? I mean, that's going to be huge. We've had to sprinkle a lot of young linebackers in with some seasoned linebackers. Obviously, Matt Goring has played number 9. And then we've had, different guys cycle in and out to try to stop the bleeding, Kitan Fife, and some other guys. And really just we've given up way too much production offensively on the defensive side of the ball. So Chase Van Tol will be an X factor if he's able to go. This is a big one too. I would love to see if Blair is going to be back. I'm excited to see him make plays as well, Seth. Hopefully he can stay healthy, but I think he adds a lot of athleticism and some jitter to that backfield that can create, right? He can create on his own, maybe take a 4 or 5 yard gain to a 15, 20 yard gain, which will obviously help us play in front of the sticks. And then the big X factor here, guys, it's going to be a similar deal, I think, to historical NDSU teams. I think they're going to want to run the ball on us, especially after seeing what we put on tape last week. I think they're going to think they can run the ball on us and probably just try to possess the rock as much as they can, maybe be a 60-40 run to pass ratio and play good defense. Because I think that they're going to hedge their bets that their defense is going to be able to get it done and bottle up the Jacks. So whoever can play the most mistake-free football then, not playing behind the sticks with penalties, not getting caught making mental errors, playing clean and with good ball security. I think those are going to be key, especially for if a young quarterback runs out there. My prediction for the game, in terms of productivity last week, we were only able to come up with 17 points. We're at home this week. I think if Chase goes, I think we're around the 28-point mark. If Jack Henry rolls out there, I want to say we're 23. I think we'll put 23 on the board. I think 23, 21 good guys if it's Jack Henry. If Chase is out there, I think it's 28. I think Chase gives the defense a little bit of juice, both Chases, if both suit up. And I think it'd be probably 28-20 other than that. So 1 point differential. Big stuff there. Offensively, my player to watch, my player of the game pick is going to be Alex Bullock. I think when we need him in the passing game, I could easily go Jack Smith, but Bullock tends to step up for those big plays when we need him in terms of 6. So I think he's going to have a day. I think they're going to try to get Jack Smith the ball too, again, in multiple different ways. He could be an X factor, but I'm going to go with Bullock on senior day. The senior gets it done. Defensively, I think I'm going to go with this because we need it. Rip has to get some sacks. And his motor, that's one thing you can never count Rip out of the fight. He pursues till the last whistle, till his last breath. He will pursue. He's not going anywhere. He's not going to take a last breath, but you know what I mean. You get the point. He goes all out, and I love that. So Rip is my defensive player. Special teams wise, I'm going to go coverage units because we have got to cover. We need to make it difficult for them. Horrible starting field position would be excellent. They'll probably fair catch a lot of kicks, but either way, if we bottle them up and don't let them become a factor in the team's side of things, I think we're set. Thank you guys so much for weighing in with your Q&As. Shout out again to Splitting Hairs of Brookings, South Dakota for sponsoring the pod. With that, make sure you get to the Dana. And if you're not at the Dana, make sure you check out our friends at the Wild Hare. But we know you're going to pack the place on senior day and make it loud and uncomfortable for the visitors. Should be a decent weather game, but you never know. It could change on a dime in Brookings. And just make sure you dress accordingly and hydrate, right? As always, if you go to the Wild Hare, stay responsibly wild. And with that, go big, go blue, go Jacks.